Energy Transition, Episode 6, the International Energy Agency Recommendations for Europe. It's a pleasure having Irina Slav, energy journalist, David Blackman, contributor to Forbes and the editor for Shale magazine. My name is Armando Cavagna. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Irina.
Good morning and good evening.
Good morning, everyone.
Great. The 10-point plan for Europe to reduce energy dependence on Russia, diversify gas imports, and improve clean energy in the region. Are these points practical, achievable? David, would you please like to comment this?
Well, I mean, the first point obviously is it says do not sign any new gas supply contracts with Russia. I think, the governments of Europe can accomplish that. It seems pretty simple, at least on the surface. The rest of these 9 other suggestions from the IEA, and which were reinforced by the UN's Secretary General this morning, are not really very practical. They all are suggestions that would require, for example, one suggestion is to increase Europe's natural gas storage capacity and fill it up with natural gas. Well, that requires additional natural gas supplies from somewhere. I'm not really sure where all that natural gas is going to come from, if not from Russia. US LNG is pretty well maxed out at this point going to Europe, and will take quite some time and additional capacity expansions to ramp up even higher. And, there's Norwegian pipeline gas coming into Europe. But, European ratepayers are already paying exorbitant electricity prices because of supplying natural gas to other countries. So I'm not sure how much they're going to be willing to bear. So the rest of the list is, to me, seems very impractical, very expensive, and very time consuming.
You're muted, Armando.
Oh yeah, sorry, Irina. Could you please comment too? It's very important because you have a very intriguing text on oil price. Very, very good.
Yeah. And that was just my first take. I'm not done with this. Well, as David said correctly, the only actual practical and feasible of these 10 steps is the first one. The contracts with Gazprom are expiring, just don't renew them. That's perfectly doable. It does not require billions of investment. But the rest are partly just theoretical, partly dependent on the weather. Seriously, I couldn't believe they are actually putting this down, that they expect a return to normal seasonal weather, which will increase the output from wind and solar installations. They're saying this in March, and they're expecting it for the rest of the year. This is wishful thinking at its worst. And then there's an acceleration of the change from gas heaters to heat pumps. There's some kind of obsession with heat pumps in Europe, I think. And then there's, as David pointed out, the filling up of gas storage. This gas has to come from somewhere, as do LNG imports. And I especially like the mention of enhanced dialogue with LNG exporters. Well, that's really specific, We'll just ask for more and they'll give it to us. And then
of course, that's how the world always works, right?
Yeah. And then there's my other favorite is turning the thermostats down by a degree. Now, normally I'm all for this. we try to maintain at home, we try to maintain a temperature about 20 degrees Celsius. It's perfectly normal. I'm wearing a sweater. That's also normal given the weather conditions outside right now. But telling a whole continent to turn their thermostats down by a degree, how exactly do you do this if there are millions of people who are used to having their thermostats at 22 degrees?
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
really theoretical, really wishful thinking.
Yeah.
And
Almost
Irina,
impossible.
do you also agree that when you really read through this document and look at what they're suggesting, literally the only stakeholders in all of this discussion that the IEA is asking to make sacrifices are utility customers who must turn their thermostats down and bear the higher costs of doing all these things that require billions in investments.
Yes, but also utility companies, because they're also proposing a windfall tax. I'm sure this will go down very well with utility companies.
Yeah. Right. And who's been making windfall profits? I mean, Armando, you may have a question about this later, but we should discuss who it is that's been making windfall profits in the European power sector over the last decade. It hasn't been the utilities. It's been wind and solar power.
Yeah. That's right.
Oh, yes, yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead, please, Adrian.
No, I was going to mention the point about accelerating the buildup of wind and solar. In addition to expecting normal weather conditions, whatever this means, they're going to accelerate the buildup of wind and solar by facilitating the permitting process of new wind and solar installation. Really, is this the only problem? Because they're making it sound like the permitting process is the only problem. It's not.
Yeah. But is it really possible to survive, to live without the Russia gas? Because wind, solar is not for now, it's for the future. We understand that we are planning and constructing these structures for the future. But nowadays we do not have enough of these renewables energy. So can we survive without the gas from Russia?
Survive, absolutely, yes. It just won't be very comfortable. I'm sure that parts of what Gazprom used to export to Europe can be replaced with LNG, but not all of it. They were at almost 40% of European gas supplies. They could bring in more gas from elsewhere, but not the whole 40%.
Right.
So they will have to do something about nuclear, which is also in the steps, surprisingly. They will have to find more gas from other sources. And as David said, US LNG is maxed out, Norway is maxed out. And they will need to not just consume right now, they will need to fill up the storage facilities, which means even more gas, which will be even more expensive wherever they find it from.
Right. Yeah, and we should note that the price for natural gas in Europe rocketed up by what, 50% overnight last night, based on news coming from Ukraine and Russia. You also have the timing problem. Okay, this whole document is based on the premise that Europe can somehow do without Russian natural gas next winter, which, as Irina pointed out in her piece over the weekend, is 7 months from now. Now, U.S. LNG capacity is expanding, and we will have new capacity come online as this year goes on. But not all of that natural gas capacity, LNG capacity, is going to be dedicated to Europe. It can't be. These suppliers and exporters have contractual arrangements with countries all over the world. And so, but some of it can go to Europe. But to think you're going to replace 40% of your daily consumption in 7 months is not realistic, and it doesn't really matter what you do. And the other thing is, yes, I think Europe could replace Russian natural gas entirely over time, But it's going to also require these countries that have resources of natural gas. I mean, we know, for example, Germany and the UK have very ample resources of natural gas that they refuse to exploit, for, they claim, climate change concerns. And they've chosen not to try to drill and produce that natural gas. Well, if they want to replace Russia from their supply picture, producing their own resources is a no-brainer. It's what you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to do it responsibly and with modern technology to ensure emissions profile is minimized. But you can't just continue to do business as usual under the Energy Wind program that they've had in place for the last 10 years and just expect, as Irina points out, that somehow the weather is going to return to whatever normal is overnight. The world just doesn't work that way.
And where can we capture this gas, natural gas, from North Africa and from United States, from the LNG exports? But is it consistent for a long term, these solutions?
Well, I can speak for the United States. I mean, the extent of our natural gas resources in the United States is enormous. I mean, yes, it can be sustained for the long term. I don't think the world really understands how massive the resource for natural gas in the U.S. is. And really, I don't think most people in the United States government understand it. But yes, this could be expanded and sustained for many decades. And, but whether these people making the decisions on all of this are going to understand that and act upon it is an entirely different question. And as is the question about whether the money actually will exist to do all these things, because it all costs billions and billions of dollars to develop and it takes years of time.
But David, the cost to produce this LNG in the United States and the transportation costs, that's not so easy. The logistics is very heavy. So this can be maintained for a long term. I mean, is it a business attractiveness for this, comparing to natural gas from pipelines, for instance?
Well, it's more expensive, certainly, than natural gas coming from produced in your own country, or in the example of Germany, produced in Norway and brought in via pipeline. That's obviously going to be less costly than bringing it in from 4,000 miles overseas. And of course, the other big cost here and limitation on LNG is the number of LNG tanker ships that are available. There's a finite fleet of those ships in the world, and those ships, each one of them costs probably in excess of $1 billion to build now, and takes many months to complete. And so, I know at one point, for example, ExxonMobil about 20 years ago was occupying 70% or something like that of the world's shipbuilding capacity to build a fleet of LNG tankers. So it's a very money and energy intensive project just to expand the fleet of tankers available to move it.
Irina, do you see the wind and solar generation enough in a short or medium term to replace those other source of energy?
No, I don't. And the problem is not just weather patterns, which the International Energy Agency and Brussels conveniently ignore. That even in very sunny countries such as Spain and Portugal, the sun does not shine consistently throughout the year. We are in a temperate climate zone. We have 4 seasons, and sunshine varies with the seasons. I don't think anyone can put it any simpler than that. And then there is the question of power density, and linked to it, the question of land. Solar and wind both need a lot of land. but I'm actually planning a Substack article specifically on this issue. But just in short, it's problematic. The land use of solar farms, especially utility scale, because this is what the EU is betting on, and this is what the IEA is advising. They're betting on utility scale. This means acres upon acres of solar panels. Europe is not exactly full of deserts and unusable land that could easily be converted into solar farms. So this is a huge challenge, in addition to the intermittency problem and to the seasonality of weather patterns.
Yeah.
So I don't think wind and solar would ever be able to do it on their own, even with battery storage, which would require even more land.
Is more a complement of energy than the center of the energy.
Yes, absolutely. For example, rooftop solar is a very good idea in places with milder weather, when there isn't frequent hail, for example, or a lot of snow. It's a very good idea, rooftop solar. Well, of course, you need to take these things into account. David knows this, I'm sure you know this too, but our decision makers don't seem to do this. They don't seem to be thinking about this. You know, they think that you just install the solar panels on the rooftop and that's it. It's not, sadly.
David, supposing that you are becoming the new International Energy Agency president, director today, what are the 10 key points you would like to issue for the Europe in this case?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first one would be to exploit your own resources. I mean, you know, a decision to not exploit a country's own mineral wealth is a decision to greatly harm your economy and the living standards of the people inside your country. It's always going to be more expensive to bring energy sources in from other countries than it is to produce it in your own country. I do think continuing to expand wind and solar to the extent it makes sense is a good one, but Irina's point about land use is very valid. I mean, even in the United States, where we have desert land all over the country, really, I mean, just massive swaths of desert land, when you drill for oil and gas, the environmental community goes crazy if you kill a lizard, but they don't mind if you take up 1,000 acres for a solar farm. Nobody says anything about the lizards, and no one says anything about the hundreds of thousands of birds that die every year from running into the giant wind turbines. But I mean, we have to be consistent about these things. And we also have to recognize that wind and solar are really efficient and effective energy sources when in a diversified energy grid that's managed properly. And that they do make the one point in the IEA document about diversifying electricity grids in Europe. And that's a good point. They do need diversification, but that can't just mean piling more and more wind and solar and not expanding anything else. You're going to need all of the above and as much of it as you can get, unless you want to take your populations back to a 19th century existence. And that's just the reality of the world as it's going to be. So, I mean, I do think diversification is key, though, and energy efficiency. Again, that's another very valid thing to talk about. And it's really been a very effective part of the transition as it's happened so far. Energy efficiency and focusing on ways to make all forms of energy more efficient is a really effective suggestion. Obviously, the storage obligations, they talk about the minimum natural gas storage obligations, is a valid point, but how do you get there is going to be the key. You're going to need Russian natural gas supplies, for the foreseeable future. just because you're not going to be able to secure enough of it from other sources to completely eliminate it. And hydrogen. Look beyond solutions. So far, the proponents of this transition, and the IEA has been very guilty of this, have focused almost solely on wind, solar, and electric vehicles as the magic bullets that are going to solve all the world's energy problems. They aren't. That's not going to happen. And we need to keep open minds about other energy sources, and hydrogen, I think, and not just green hydrogen, making up these artificial colors for hydrogen and saying this color is good and this color is bad is just nonsense. Stop trying to discriminate against forms of hydrogen, and also stop discriminating against hydrogen in your government policy, because it can be, I honestly, I think in the future, hydrogen will end up playing a bigger role in transportation than electric vehicles do. So I guess that's not 10 suggestions, but that's what I have available today.
Yeah, Irina, for you, what are the priorities in terms of actions to be taken? I mean, the three main ones that, because winter is coming, and in 7 months we are starting a new winter in North.
Well, we'll need to try and consume less energy. I'm afraid this is the one thing that will work, but how we're going to do this, I don't know. What else? Governments will need to help. They are helping. They are trying to cushion the blow on households, but I would suggest that they start thinking more about this cushioning and less about heat pumps. Seriously, this heat pump obsession is a complete mystery to me. Why they insist so much? We have air conditioners. They do a perfectly good job if we really want to be lower emitters. So maybe try to think a little bit outside this little box of heat pumps, and lowering thermostats by 1 degree is a good idea. But raising awareness that you could lower your thermostat by 1 degree and not die of exposure is also something they might consider doing. But it might cause panic on the other hand. We don't have enough energy, we have to conserve all the horror. So we don't really have a lot of good moves there. We'll just need to get used to more expensive energy for the observable future, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Let's go to final comments from David and Irina about this opportunity to apply these 10 points from International Energy Agency.
Well, it's of very limited utility. I think it's a classic IEA document that doesn't really contain a lot of useful information or suggestions for anyone. It's more of a virtue signaling exercise designed to kind of shift the focus from Europe needs more and diversified energy sources to we need to double down on the energy transition to solve everyone's problems. And that's the narrative that the IEA and the UN and the international elites have been pushing now for the last 2 years. And it's obvious that even this crisis in Europe that's happening right now is not going to change that narrative. The only way the narrative will change is if these elites get changed. And my whole belief about this energy transition and really the crisis that we have coming at us globally is that we have the wrong people making the decisions for the rest of us. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to change anytime soon either.
Irina, your final comments about these issues?
Actually, the only thing I can think of right now is a very specific comment, sort of a food for thought for decision makers, not that they will eat it, but the suggestion that you could just end long-term contracts with Gazprom and be happy is wrong, because once you end these contracts, you might end up having to buy Russian gas on the spot market. And today, the price per billion cubic meters, last I checked, was $3,600. So just some food for thought.
Interesting.
Yeah.
My suggestion is that we start praying to stop this nonsense war, because this is only
we
Yes.
all are. Yeah. But it
Yes.
won't. Things won't change very quickly, even after the actual military action ends. Unfortunately, the energy problem of Europe dates way back, and it won't be solved so quickly.
Yeah, this crisis is the result of 15 years of bad decision making, and it'll take at least that long to correct it all.
Yeah,
misunderstandings every day.
indeed.
Was a pleasure to have Irina Slav and David Blackman here today. A really pleasure for me. Thank you.
Always a
very much.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank
Hope you have a great week.